Welcome back to the Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Raymond Wu. And in this final segment today, we're going to discuss with Mr. Alan Romberg about cross-strait relations and about U.S. policy towards Taiwan Strait. Alan, we see that there's been a lot of progress, certainly in the positive sense, since May of 2008 in cross-strait relations. First, the ARAT and CEF institutional dialogue has been resumed after 10 years. And also, direct three links, is now the reality, not only just a policy objective that people have been trying to attain for the past 15, 20 years. And given that, would you think that the progress, the momentum in easing the tension across the Taiwan Strait, and would that be helpful not only for Beijing and Taipei, but also in terms of the trilateral context between U.S., China, and Taiwan?
There's no question about that, Raymond, absolutely. Okay. The United States has for a long time been urging an easing of tensions and, indeed, on the economic side, a realization of the importance of the links between Taiwan and the mainland.
Of course.
I think everybody is aware that over-dependence on the mainland would be risky for Taiwan, and so nobody's trying to promote that sort of thing.
No.
But the reality is that unless Taiwan and the mainland have robust economic relations that serve the interests of both, it'll be very difficult for Taiwan. And so U.S. policy has been, I think, pretty consistent under a series of presidents now going back 30 and more years, where we have a one China policy, not the same as the PRC's one China principle, but nonetheless our relationship with Taiwan is an unofficial one, et cetera, but it is one
very important.
But it is one that pays a lot of attention to assisting as best we can Taiwan's prosperity, its democratic development, and its security. And that has been, I think, a very successful policy. I think it will continue to be the policy. I have no doubt about that under the Obama administration. It sometimes causes some tensions, sometimes with Taiwan, sometimes with the PRC, as with the reaction to the recent arms sales. But I think it is essentially the only successful potential policy for the United States. And I personally see no reason to change it, and I also have no expectation that it will be changed. Will aspects of it potentially evolve over time? That's possible. But I think in fundamental terms, it's a very consistent policy.
Yeah, I think with the easing of tensions across the Taiwan Strait, not only Washington is breathing a little easier, but also neighboring countries like Japan and Southeast Asia also welcoming the changes, the progress that we've seen in cross-strait relations since May of 2008. But we have domestic discontent, especially from the opposition, saying that this is opening up to China too quickly, too fast. Would you think that, notwithstanding, what the opposition are claiming, would you think that this direction, very important, bilateral relations between China and Taiwan, is moving in a, generally speaking, a positive direction at the desired pace, not too fast, not too slow?
My own sense is that's correct, but I think that this is obviously a question most fundamentally for the people of Taiwan to decide. I have the sense that the Ma administration is sensitive to public opinion. I mean, after all, there are limits to how far this relationship can go if there isn't a very broad consensus in Taiwan supporting it. President Ma has talked about, as President Hu Jintao has talked about, a peace accord.
Yes.
Very difficult, tricky, but potentially very important. But you can't have a peace accord that is simply negotiated between two governments, but isn't supported by the people, at least in Taiwan. And everybody, I think, is quite well aware of this. So all of these issues have to be saleable and accepted in a very deep sense by people in Taiwan. So whether there are complaints about specifics, whether there are complaints about the general direction and so on, those are things that Taiwan voters are eventually going to make a judgment about. But I think from an American point of view, that the direction is the right direction. Pace.
And the pace?
Well, the pace, I think, is okay. Actually, in some respects, I think there's a concern that Beijing may not move quite quickly enough on some of these issues to, in fact, help generate that domestic consensus within Taiwan.
For example?
For example, we have coming up in May the issue of the World Health Assembly, the WHA.
Exactly.
And the question of Taiwan's observer status or in some other way participating in that assembly. I think that it is clear that people who work on the Taiwan question in the mainland fully understand the depth of sentiment here in Taiwan about the importance of this.
Issues, yes.
But whether they can, in fact, translate that into a policy which will satisfy people here remains to be seen. I think that the speech which Hu Jintao gave on December 31,
yes.
We don't know what it means in specific terms, but I think it gave some pretty good indicators that the mainland is thinking in flexible terms, not on the fundamental issue of sovereignty or anything like that. I think it would be a mistake to even imagine that they will compromise on those kinds of questions. But within that,
yes.
How they do this evolves, and indeed, Hu said that in his speech.
Yes.
So that I'm hopeful, I don't know whether I'm optimistic, that they will, in fact, find a way
be more creative.
In a creative sense, address this issue in May. And then there are going to be other issues like this as well. And we'll have to see. I mean, I think it would be very useful if symbolically, if nothing else, the PRC were to draw down some of the missiles opposite Taiwan, as President Ma has said must happen before negotiations on a peace accord can in fact start.
Yeah.
This is something which the two sides need to talk about.
Yes.
And I think
to be negotiated.
One of the things, well, even to outline to each other what it is that they're concerned about. And I think one of the things that the mainland welcomed in President Ma's inaugural address was an open, expressed willingness to talk about these questions. I think they felt that for the previous decade, really,
yes.
there had been insistence that Taiwan deserved this or that or the other thing, but not a willingness to talk about it.
There was a lot of preconditions to any type of negotiation.
Right. So I think that dialogue is going to be very important in this, and we don't know whether it can be successful. These are not easy issues.
No.
PRC is not going to want to give up its principled position on sovereignty. Neither is Taipei.
No.
So one needs to find ways around these very difficult issues that satisfy both sides, or else you're not going to get where you want to get.
That's the beauty of international politics, you compromise. But Alan, since May of 2008, the most part of the negotiation between Taipei and Beijing is primarily on the economic issues, so-called the normalization of economic ties across the strait.
Right.
But, like we said, eventually, both Taipei and Beijing will have to face the politically sensitive issues like international space, Taiwan's political status, and many others. And given that on December 31st, the last day of 2008, President Hu Jintao of China gave a very, in my opinion, very important speech. He outlined 6 points. Out of the 6 points, I think 2 was very, very important and very, very, refreshing, at least to me. First is on the establishing some type of military-to-military confidence building measure. And the second is he actually used the phrase that before the two sides unifies. So in a sense that he's acknowledging in a more than implicit way that the two sides are not a single entity politically at this time. And based on that speech, how would you think, or how would you make recommendations to the administration here as to how do we follow up on the points outlined by Mr. Hu Jintao in the December 31st speech?
Well, I'm not sure I want to make recommendations to your government.
Suggestions.
But I think that you do highlight the 2 key parts of the speech. First, on confidence-building measures, this was first mentioned publicly by the PRC government in 2004 in a statement issued on May 17, 3 days before President Chun's inauguration.
Yes.
But it was cast as a bright prospect.
Yes.
In the right circumstances.
Very vague. Yes.
Now he said still at the appropriate time. But nonetheless, it is a more operational concept that he's talking about. Okay, and I think that fits in with the notion that although the policy and the principles remain the same, what you can do within that framework changes as circumstances change. So we'll see. And I read an account that the Ministry of National Defense here said it's done a study about confidence building mechanism, and it's ready to talk at any time. So we'll see how that goes. I hope it goes well. It's not easy. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's something that perhaps could happen in the next 3.5 years or 4 years. On the question of international space, I think that the phrase you point to is important. It isn't so much that Beijing hasn't recognized before that the two sides aren't unified, but it is, I think, the first time, first of all, at that level.
Yes.
But also that people have said explicitly that in this, what they call special circumstance of not being unified, they should find a way to have a dialogue about political relationships. And I think that that is realistic. It fits in with what I think has been a very consistent approach by Hu Jintao to be patient. Right? We used to worry about the former leaders, Jiang Zemin especially, talking about deadlines, so on and so forth. I think Mr. Hu has been rather more consistent about saying we can be patient. We have a showstopper, and that's Taiwan independence. Right now, he's not worried about Taiwan independence. I mean, obviously, they worry about the future, but he's got a leadership here in Taiwan which is not in favor of it.
Final question for today. Will the U.S. arms sales to Taiwan continue under President Obama?
I think arms sales definitely will continue under President Obama. What they will be, I think, depends on the assessment of military need, and he made that clear in his statement at the time of the Bush administration's approval in October.
I want to thank you, Alan, to be my guest on the Taiwan Outlook today. I will look forward to return trip to Taipei, and maybe we can arrange some, another appointment, another visit for you to be on the program.
Thanks very much, Raymond.
Thank
it's
you.
A pleasure.
Yes.
Appreciate
Happy
it.
New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Yes. Well, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time on MacroView Television.